All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials World podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? There's a lot of really just beautiful love stories out there that, the love story goes, there's like a failed guy who just sucks at everything. People hate him, and he just needs just a cute girl to kind of save him from his own sense of insecurity and his own neatness, particularly neetness,
A
but
whimsical girl, maybe a little bit quirky, maybe a little bit of a free spirit.
exactly. But there's apparently a
Basically, an
movie.
annoying woman.
Yes, a very annoying woman, exactly. Zach Braff definitely knows that kind of annoying woman.
Ugh.
But you know what? People don't really talk about maybe not girl, maybe not even woman, but maybe that type of person, but a granny? Maybe like an 80-year-old
What?
year old woman?
Unthinkable. I assume that all of these women, when they age up past 32, they become, the headmaster from Matilda.
Exactly. They become Mother Superior from fucking Silent Identity.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But you know what? There's apparently a movie out there that describes the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, but it's Manic Pixie Dream Grandma. And it's called Harold and Maude. So you know what, Brian? There's obviously a lot of discussion going on about age gap relationships. People are very cool about it. So I thought this week it would be great to review that movie. So this week's review is going to be on the classic film Harold and Maude. But before we get into our review this week, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Millennial of the Week, Cringe Generation Moment of the
Week.
Woo! Yeah! All right, let's get to it.
Little bit, I guess, of a broader topic again, in part because it crosses generations. So it's not inherently a Gen X or a Boomer or a Millennial or a Zoomer topic. In fact, it might even involve all of these generations interacting. So, Taylor, do you read a lot of age gap discourse on Twitter? Do you ever just feel like you really want to abuse yourself and just check into that?
I unfortunately do, Brian, because
Me too.
as
I love it.
as a guy who's now 31, an elderly millennial, I happen to find a lot of young women who are into me, a lot of women in their early to mid 20s, sometimes late 20s. I don't usually find women even a little bit older than me that are interested in me. So I often get yelled at because a 26-year-old wants to date me. And I'm not interested in hearing anybody on Twitter talk about it, but every once in a while I will abuse myself by looking at it. And I think you people are losers. Just straight up losers.
It's the most insane. Okay. It's the most insane shit. Okay. I'm not even going to bother prefacing this with the obvious thing that, like, grooming is bad, power imbalances are bad. This shit's weird. This shit where a bunch of people online talk about two, like, people well into their adulthood and say, like, this is actually really disgusting. Or, like, when you see, like, someone tweet or, like, X post, as an 18-year-old, if I dated a 16-year-old, I think I should literally be executed. It makes me so sick to think of.
Something that is literally not even immoral. It's not even illegal in literally any state, as far as I'm aware of.
I mean, let's be real. That's not an age gap. They're the same age. Like,
Yeah.
that's the same age.
They could be in the same high school class together. Like, seriously.
Yeah. But so one of there's always age gap discourse going on in the 2020s. There just always is. Cannot get away from it, right? Right now, friend of the show, Hunter Biden, is involved in some age gap discourse because in his current trial, one of the key witnesses is his ex-girlfriend, who is half his age. This is just a bounty for me because I get to see a bunch of right-wing freaks who are just like the biggest perverts in the world. They just are. Say, this is degenerate. She's literally half his age. And, like, that's a pretty big age gap. I'm not, like, that's not what I would want to do or whatever. That's an adult. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Those are two adults. There's age gap discourse about Sabrina Carpenter, 25, and Barry Keoghan, 31.
You were talking about that just as we started recording. And, like, even among the age gap people, because, like, the general age gap, like, acceptance before the Twitter freaks come out, it's usually half your age plus 7. And if he's
Yeah, exactly.
31, that would be half. So we'll just round up to 16. So 16 plus 7. So 23. She's 25.
Yeah.
That's perfectly
that's
reasonable.
half your age plus 7 was what we always grew up with, and it's not even a hard and fast rule. It's a good general rule to follow to make sure that, like, you're judging the situation you're in well. And it was always like, I feel like it's this weird thing. We talk about Puritans a lot, and we're actually, obviously we're planning to talk about them a lot more because that's one of the weirdest things going on in like generational politics. But I guess the way I see it is you've got these young people who kind of grew up with a certain type of well-intentioned, very situational kind of identity politics, and kind of they're trying to make sense of all the weird shit they see. Right? They're trying to make rules for things to make sure that everything's fair and balanced, and they overcorrect in this weird way where they go like, well, we need to make this like this rule and we need to make sense of it. And you see people like, I'm gonna be honest, I find a lot of age gap discourse like not just like funny, like we're making fun of it, it's funny as shit, but also kind of disturbing. I find a lot of it, and I'm not the ideal person to say this, I find a lot of it kind of sexist. I think a lot of it basically involves infantilizing young women in a weird way and say like, well, a 25-year-old woman, she doesn't know what she's doing if she dates someone in their 40s, I find it kind of weird.
Yeah, even biologically and evolutionarily, like people's brains are fully developed by about 25 or 26. So I'm not sure exactly where the people are like, oh, this 25-year-old is being taken advantage of by a 31-year-old. But like realistically speaking, and everything's contextual, right? People mature in different ways. Some people are just at different levels. So like even in the power dynamic bullshit that they have in their head, right? Even in that range, a 25-year-old and a 31-year-old might be at the exact same stage in life. Like, it's not that shocking.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You want to talk about the power imbalance? And Barry Keoghan is a rising star. There is a power imbalance between him and Sabrina Carpenter right now. Have you heard any of Sabrina Carpenter's songs about Barry Keoghan? They are low-key insulting. She is fucking owning her older boyfriend in these songs, basically calling him a dork and an Irish lush. Not joking.
Oh, that is actually genuinely really fucking hilarious. And yeah, that's the sort of thing I think too, because like I'm not super familiar with Sabrina Carpenter. From what I've understood,
it's fine. It's pop music. It's fine.
She's been famous and probably a lot wealthier for a long time than Barry Keoghan, because I think we may have mentioned this on a previous episode, or maybe we talked about it offline here. But like Barry Keoghan literally grew up in an Irish orphanage.
Yeah, like an Irish orphan. All of his friends were boxers.
Yeah, and like Ireland now versus even 10 years ago was a significantly different place. But being an Irish orphan up until like 3 days ago was like a third world living situation, like straight up. Like that is a bad situation to be in.
He grew up like a Dickensian street urchin.
So if you're talking about fucking power imbalance, there's a pretty significant power imbalance there. Wasn't Sabrina Carpenter like on the fucking Disney Channel when she was a kid or some shit?
Yeah.
Like,
and that is, I think, like that's just one example, but it's how often do we hear people talk about like income gaps, which is a much bigger issue if we're talking about power imbalances in it. And again, like it would be easy if we had haters, which I don't think we do. I think everyone that listens to us likes us, for them to like, I think, take what we're saying kind of out of context. But like obviously there's way more, I think, predatory citizen gaps in relationships, or income gaps, but I never hear people talk about those. And I think it's because the age gap just is like, I think because everyone across pretty much all like political parties and ideology can pretend to be like, well, that's disgusting.
Well, also, I think it's one of those things where it's the most face value inequality you can possibly like see. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, when it comes to like power imbalance, when it comes to financial stuff and class and, education and stuff, you can't necessarily see that on people. But if you see, a 40-year-old with like a 27-year-old, that's generally pretty visible.
Yeah,
so maybe that's why.
Point. Yeah,
it's literally the most judge a book by its cover level, like fucking judgment you can possibly do. Maybe outside of like fat shaming relationships, somebody like, or like not necessarily that, but like, like way
mixed
out
attractiveness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's another one. But yeah, both of them, it's just like, that's so surface level. Like
and it's just
very immature.
It's an
no pun intended.
Easy way to position yourself in a like kind of facilely moral way. And I guess the reason that there's obvious reason that this applies to today's subject, but part of it's because like Harold and Maude is like a beautiful movie. It's one of the most beautiful love stories I think it's ever been told in like modern like American cinema or culture writ large. And it's a fucking age gap.
Yeah, this is one of those where okay, let's get into the details first because if people haven't seen this movie, I don't want to quite spoil it yet. But let's just say the age gap maybe is a little bit more noticeable than let's just say Sabrina Carpenter and Barry Keoghan or something like that.
It's a significant age gap, and I still think it's a beautiful love story.
No, for sure, absolutely. But yeah, so
it's significant.
Yes. So once again, the subject of this week is Harold and Maude. It came out in 1971. It was rated PG. And the first trivia fact I had here is to avoid an R rating, a controversial swear word had to be eliminated from the scene in which Harold and Maude sit under the sunset. And I'm assuming that horrible swear word was serendipity. I'm kidding, obviously. But I'm assuming it's fuck, because fuck is the one word that if you want a PG-13, you can use a non-sexual version of fuck one time in a movie and still get a PG-13. Although PG-13 didn't exist when this movie came out, so maybe they still could have gotten away with that.
My guess is that Maude asks Harold if he's ever fucked at some point in the movie.
That's actually a really good point. I did not think about
That's a scene I can see happening in the context of the movie, and he gets kind of flustered, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I didn't even think of that, but you're probably correct. I would bet money that is...
Or she asks, have you seen a cunt or something...
Yeah, wasn't cunt one of the 7 words you couldn't say on TV? I think it was, right?
I mean, that's a Carlin bait. Yeah, it is.
And, speaking of...
fuck, cunt, cocksucker, and fuck.
But, speaking of people who are obsessed with George Carlin, so this movie was directed by Hal Ashby. It was written by Colin Higgins. It was produced by, once again, Colin Higgins and Charles B. Mulvihill. And Hal Ashby was primarily an editor and director, so he mostly edited films before he became a director. I think this was his 3rd feature film, I believe. I don't think it was his directorial debut, but it's pretty early on in his directorial film career. And he edited such films as The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, In the Heat of the Night, which I don't know if you've ever seen The Heat of the Night. That's a fucking great movie.
I have.
The Thomas Crown Affair is another famous movie that he edited.
Have not seen that.
I've only ever seen out of the 3 of the famous ones that I picked here, Heat of the Night. Heat of the Night is absolutely fantastic. Just really good.
Heat of the Night is great. Hal Ashby, I haven't seen all of his films, but he's directed Heat of the Night, which is great. And he directed, of course, Harold and Maude and Shampoo. Harold and Maude and Shampoo are both probably top 20 or top 25 films for me.
They're definitely top, I would say 25 films that are emblematic of the early 70s, I will say.
They are. we refer to New Hollywood pretty frequently on those shows in this show, and I think both of those films are great examples of just what a strange transitional period this was for mainstream American films.
It really fucking was, Jesus Christ. But, speaking of, so yeah, you mentioned that he, of course, directed this film. He directed some of the movies, one of them, The Last Detail, as we mentioned, Shampoo, Coming Home, Being There, which is a movie that I've heard be referenced a lot, but I've never seen it, but I've heard it's really good. And he also directed it was one of the 70s Rolling Stone concert films, and he also directed Solo Trans, I think it was Willie Nelson concert film, I think.
That makes sense.
I could be wrong about that.
Him directing a Stones concert film actually really makes sense, because there's something about kind of the themes he explores and kind of the weird mix of whimsy and raunch that's very Stones friendly.
It wasn't Willie Nelson, sorry, it was Neil Young. It was the Neil Young concert film.
Because he has that album Trans that he made for his autistic son.
Okay, never mind. I'm not going to make that joke. It's Pride Month. I'm not going to make any autistic trans people jokes. All right. No.
Well, I think it's in reference to transatlantic, because his son loved trains. Legit.
Interesting. Trans people never like trains. It's a very interesting connection there. But anyways, so mentioned Colin Higgins earlier. So he was a director, writer, and producer. He worked in various capacities on such movies as, of course, this film, Silver Streak, Foul Play, the Dolly Parton film 9 to 5, and also the Dolly Parton film The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. I have not seen either of those Dolly Parton films, but I know 9 to 5 is obviously a blue-collar classic. And Charles...
Those would be good movies to do for the pod someday.
Talk about the 9 to 5 grind as millennials. Jesus Christ. I mean, we might be the single biggest cucks in the employment sector, being honest.
We work all the time and we get nothing out of it. We get nothing for it.
Exactly. We don't even get the authenticity that the Gen X people think they get.
No, we have to live with the knowledge that we all are fucking love our jobs, and that's what we do.
And then Charles B. Mulvihill is a producer. He is most known for producing such films as, once again, this film, Being There, The Postman, Always Rings, Twice Remake, Godfather Part 3, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and The Last Samurai, which was the last film he produced. Now, I know a lot of people joke about that film and how whitewashed Hollywood is. It's a movie called The Last Samurai, and the main character is Tom Cruise. But it's not a movie about him being the last samurai. It's apparently an autobiography about like an American journalist who went to Japan to literally watch the last samurais get murdered.
Yeah, I have not watched that movie, but I've known people who actually like it quite a bit.
I mean, the idea of Tom Cruise being a journalist or whatever he was, missionary or something, like watching the Meiji Restoration happen in real time actually sounds really fascinating. I'm surprised I haven't gotten around to it.
I mean, that was a huge movie when we were kids.
It was. No, I remember it being advertised all the fucking time. But yeah, no, I mean, I would say pre-modern Japanese history is, of course, very interesting to me because, of course, I'm a giant weeb. But,
That tracks.
Yeah. Oh, geez. And then, so this movie had a budget of 1.2 million and it grossed, and I'm not kidding, this was the most common source I found, it grossed $2,614. So this movie makes S. Craig Zoller movies look like fucking Titanic and fucking Avatar. Next trivia fact I had here is, as an example of the cult following the film developed, Harold and Maude played for a total of 1,957 showings from 1972 until 1974 at the Westgate Theater in Edina, Minnesota, which is a very interesting location. And I think that actually may have a connection to two other very critically lauded directors, because I believe the Coen brothers grew up in Edina, but I could be wrong about that. I knew they grew up in the Twin Cities metro area, so maybe they saw this movie and were partially like inspired. Because
I could see that.
Even though this isn't like the most Coen brothers ass movie of all time, there's definitely some Coen brothers elements that I could see.
There is. If you look at it, there's several strands of kind of Gen X era, like indie filmmaking, that can be tracked back directly to Hal Ashby, I think.
Yes, and before we get into the plot synopsis here, I have a feeling that Wes Anderson like jerked off to this movie growing up. Like, I would not be shocked by that.
He's trying so hard to capture like this mix of kind of morbidity and whimsy and kind of matter of factness, this dryness. And I just don't. I mean, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, big time. I don't like Wes Anderson. I'm just gonna say it. I think he kind of sucks, but I think he's very much trying to capture this specific kind of mode.
Yes, very much so. And I literally just looked it up as you were talking about Wes Anderson. Apparently, the Coen brothers grew up in St. Louis Park, which is the city right next door to Edina. So, like, they may have seen this movie growing up because they would have been, like, young adults, late teens when this movie was being shown.
I'd almost guarantee they did.
And, well, speaking of people that like this movie, on Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 86% critic score and a 93% audience score. And another trivia fact I had here is, in the June 2008, magazine issue of the American Film Institute's magazine, I'm assuming it's American Film Institute or their website or something like that, but they ranked it 9th on the greatest films of the romantic comedy genre, which I think is very interesting. And
yeah, this is probably the best romantic comedy for my money.
I mean, it's a very morbid one, but it's definitely up there for sure. This movie is a lot more well, to be fair, it's actually a lot more like adorably morbid, because I would consider a lot of romantic comedies to be morbid, but in a more banal way.
Accidentally.
Yeah. A lot of them that just show the sort of banal pointlessness of a lot of like fucking human connections.
And they're like, oh, isn't this adorable?
But this movie's like actually like morbid, but it's kind of beautiful in a way that a lot of those movies aren't.
Because this movie, like, we're joking about the age gap stuff, but the filmmakers are fundamentally aware of how big this age gap is. Like, that is, at least on the surface, the driving point of what brings you to watch the movie.
Oh, no, everybody acknowledges it. So it's not like you watch, Next, the Nick Cage movie. And there's this really funny scene where I think it's Jessica Biel. I think that's the actress. And Nick Cage. And like, he's like, I think in real life he was like 50 when that movie came out and she was like 25 or something. And there's a scene in the movie where she's like, yeah, there's just this guy who's just really fat. And she like spends like a minute talking about how amazing this guy is. And she's like, oh, he's right over there. And it like pans to Nick Cage in the most widow peak ass Nick Cage, like fucking
awesome,
like callback image you could possibly imagine. And it makes me laugh every time I think about that movie.
Awesome.
Like, and of course everybody knows Nick Cage is very famous for his widow's peak, but it's the most Nick Cage widow peak you'll ever see in your life. And it just pans immediately to him smiling with his fucking widow peak.
God bless him. We love to see it. Go get her, Nick.
Hell yeah, dude. Oh God! But speaking of a lot more adorable of an age gap here, let's get into the synopsis here. So, movie begins with Harold Chasson, played by Bud Cort, who, and I did not put this. This was not an IMDb, of course, because this is a fairly recent development. But the funny thing is that Bud Cort is now older in real life than Ruth Gordon was when this movie was being filmed, which is just insane to think about. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, they need to make a sequel to Harold and Maude where Harold, as a man in his 80s, now meets a young girl, like an 18-year-old girl, and dates her. And we'll see how the critical and commercial response to it goes.
He meets Millie Bobby Brown or something.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, so he is a young man obsessed with death. He stages elaborate fake suicides, attends funerals, usually for people that he does not know, and drives a hearse, all to the chagrin of his self-obsessed, wealthy socialite mother. And I love this because he's like a fucking proto-goth in this. He's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, he very like, and obviously, like, these kids have always existed. He's not as like, not that he's not self-aware. He's more awkward. Like, the movie portrays him as kind of like, so we as the audience don't see him as weird. We identify with him, right? But he is like the "don't come to school tomorrow" kid.
Oh my God, he literally does have the school shooter, fucking mass shooter haircut. He really
Like,
does.
he does.
That's just the reality. I'm sorry.
He has a hard time like making eye contact. He's very soft spoken and kind of withdrawn. And he is obsessed with death. He's obsessed with trying to get his mother's attention by staging increasingly disgusting suicide set pieces to have her discover.
And we're not joking when we say, like, if this guy existed now, he would just be a school shooter. Like, that's just the reality. Like, I don't think school shootings were as well known back then, so he might not have even known that was a possibility. But
right, exactly.
50 years later, this guy would have fucking shot up a middle school. Let's just be honest here. He would have.
Well, I'll be even more generous. If this movie were made in the 90s and it was otherwise the exact same plot, it would have to be full of jokes about people making fun of Harold, like saying he was a school shooter.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so his mother sends Harold to a psychoanalyst, sets him up with blind dates, and buys him a luxury car. All schemes he subverts in his own way. And yeah, I love all these like little, because essentially he is, a borderline, what would be a proto school shooter archetype neat. That's essentially what he is. And his mom's like, he's such a catch. And to be honest with you, he's kind of not a catch, let's be honest.
Well, he's not. He's actually kind of a dick. He's pretty rude. He's not really involved in anything. He's not interested in anything except for going to funerals and driving around in his hearse. And his mom is straight up like basically ambushing these like kind of preppy young women to come to their house to go on dates with him. She signs him up for computer dating. This is probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie.
Yeah,
is his mom filling out the computer. Yeah,
proto internet dating in 1971. That's genuinely insane to me. That feels like an anachronistic thing that you would see.
You can read about it. It's crazy. It's crazy, man.
I know obviously, personals ads and everything have existed for, generations now. But like the idea that there was genuinely like computer dating in a movie in 1971 feels like it would be something if somebody were making a movie about like a 1971 style romance today, people would be like, that's stupid. That doesn't exist.
And that is how, computer dating was done. They just had you fill out like the most boring questions, answer the most boring questions, and they'd match you for like compatibility, whatever. But his mom's signing off the answers for him while he sits there disinterested and just giving the most conservative answers with no thought to what Harold might think. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
It actually might be my single favorite because it also, in a lot of ways, so we haven't really gotten into Hal Ashby as a person, but he was very much a counterculture figure in the 60s and early 70s. That's like a hippie-ish type guy, right? And in this way, he is like essentially stereotyping, and I would say probably pretty accurately, of the hoity-toity sort of greatest generation and maybe even older boomer stereotype, like social mores that would exist among like a mom like this. Like, ooh, there's a question about wife swapping or whatever. And it's like, I find the question rather distasteful.
It's like, do you find wife swapping distasteful? And she says something like, I find the question itself distasteful. When she goes, has the sexual revolution gone too far? And she kind of grits her teeth and goes, it certainly has.
It certainly has. Yeah, a very waspish type.
Yeah, very waspy.
Attitude. But yeah, no, I
would agree.
Love that scene.
That scene is like, that is like the mission statement of the movie in a lot of ways.
No, absolutely. Yeah, that is a great. If you were to watch any scene of this movie, like, well, obviously, fucking Maude isn't in it, but other than that, like, just ignoring Maude, this is maybe the single best scene to watch in this movie to kind of get like just a basic synopsis on what this kind of movie has to offer.
There is one other scene that I would say I think maybe even better captures the film, but not as succinctly as this does.
No, that's totally fair. But we've been talking about Maude, so he does meet Maude, 79-year-old Maude. Now, I don't think they exactly say how old in the movie Harold is, but I think they say a young man of 19 or 20. I think they say that at some point,
Yeah,
don't they?
I always read him as 18, 19.
Yeah, he's like either 18, 19, 20. Either way, he's a very young adult, and he meets 79-year-old Maude, played by the actress Ruth Gordon. And the next trivia fact I had here is apparently Bud Cort wanted Greta Garbo to play Maude, which is hilarious because Greta Garbo had been retired for like 30 years by this point or something.
That would have been like such a like that would have shook up people to see her back in her first film in that long, and it was this though.
Maybe that would have actually made this movie become a box office success, but who the hell knows? Because Ruth Gordon was not like, well, I mean, she was in Rosemary's Baby, but she wasn't like a lead actress in that movie, obviously.
I mean, I'm so glad it was Ruth Gordon. Like, the idea of it being Greta Garbo is interesting. It's an interesting thought experiment, but I wouldn't change a thing about the casting of this movie.
No, me neither. 100% no. And then one day, while at a random stranger's funeral mass, Anne discovers they share a hobby, which is going to funerals, which is a very funny one.
Funerals of strangers, yeah.
Harold is entranced by Maude's quirky outlook on life, which is bright and delightfully carefree in contrast to his morbid demeanor. Now, before we continue on here, oh, never mind, one more sentence here. So Maude lives in a decommissioned railroad car and thinks nothing of breaking the law. She is quite skilled in stealing cars as swiftly uproots an ailing tree in a city sidewalk to replant it in the forest. Now, I think this is very interesting, right? Because I know I made the joke about the reference about Zach Braff earlier, right? But let's be real here. Garden State ripped off this movie. Poorly ripped off this movie.
I've heard people say that, and I actually have heard people more generally, pretty regularly, call Maude the proto Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and I disagree, and I want to push back on that a little bit. I do agree that Zach Braff saw this movie and tried to emulate it. I do believe that he's ripping it off. But I feel like Maude is distinct from Manic Pixie Dream Girls basically because she's a political actor, or was at some point. Like, that to me distinguishes her from like a Zoe Deschanel, like bullshit annoying character or whatever, right? So there's like, we don't know it yet, but the movie makes clear that there's like actual material social reasons that Maude acts the way she does. It's not just because she's like, oh, you ever want to make a stupid face so people think that you're R-worded because you're so unique.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, especially Zach Braff, Manic Pixie Dream Girl, it strikes me as somebody who is either very emotionally or mentally stunted, just being very polite here, whereas Maude is not. She's very clearly intelligent. She very clearly has like agency. Like, she understands like boundaries obviously to a pretty significant extent. Like, she is a mature, and not even just in age, obviously, but in demeanor more so than, the Natalie Portman character in fucking Garden State, or whatever movies Zoe Deschanel, like all the 15,000 Manic Pixie Dream Girl movies she was in.
And I guess another thing I think distinguishes her pretty hard from that trope is she doesn't revolve around Harold, right? Like, she doesn't do things. She doesn't seem to be acting for him and his realization. She's kind of just existing in like chaos that he like is part of.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, Harold is kind of along for the ride, like, essentially.
Yeah. She's not like giving Harold really some great awakening. I don't think, in the way that like Natalie Portman in Garden State, that character is like a husk who only exists as a reflection of Zach Braff's ego.
No, I would 100% agree. Yeah, I would see Harold as more finding a genuine connection with somebody who he considers an equal versus, like I said, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl stereotype. So I know I made the joke about Manic Pixie Dream Grandma, but like, I saw that on a Letterboxd review, and I'm like, okay, it's kind of funny, but yeah, you're right. As many similarities.
It's an important observation to make because the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is, you are right, 100% trying to capture this feeling. Like, it absolutely is trying to do what this movie does. I don't think it understands it. Like, the reason that this movie is so affecting, right, is because Maude has agency and she has so much nuance, and she's not, there's like kind of like this deep sadness to her and this deep understanding, and it's not like quirk for quirk's sake.
No, that's a really good way to put it. Like, there's obviously like quirky things, and this movie obviously doesn't take place in 100% of our reality, but it's not like I'm trying to think of the word here, but like the just ridiculous amount of like twee bullshit that exists in a lot of those other like fucking media. Like, it's like like, let's be honest here. Like, yeah, this movie does take place kind of in our reality, but there's obviously 10 or 15% of it that's not there. But like, yeah, like a Wes Anderson or one of those Zach Braff shitty movies or whatever. It's all like twee fucking mid 2000s, quote unquote, indie bullshit. That's the way I would describe it. Like,
actually, now that you say that, another element of this film that was influential to that brand of indie, and I can include Garden State and Wes Anderson films like The Royal Tenenbaums in this, is in its soundtrack.
That is true. Yeah, I didn't mention earlier, but Cat Stevens basically does the entire soundtrack here. And, you know, this is a timeless soundtrack. Like, I remember hearing these movies in like commercials 30, 40 years later.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily saying
songs.
just incredible songs. I mean, Cat Stevens, now known as Yusuf Islam. Maybe he'll change his name one day to Yusuf Sikh or something if he ever changes his religious preference. But either way, though, yeah.
And I'm not like, I don't like love Cat Stevens. It's not like I put this album out all the time to just listen to it. But they are great songs. They're sweet and they're catchy, and he has a nice voice, and they do perfectly like set the stage for this movie.
Absolutely, 100%. But yeah, so Harold and Maude form a bond, and Maude shows Harold the pleasures of art and music, including how to play the banjo, and teaches him how to make the most of his time on Earth. Now, that's a little bit of a prophetic statement because, you know, once again, she's 79, her birthday's a week away, and unfortunately, that's going to become very relevant at the end of the film. So they're going to make a lot. Spoilers ahead to a movie that's over 50 years old, but yeah. Her time on this earth may be a little bit more expedited than others. But meanwhile, Harold's mother, has his mother ever have a name in the movie? I don't think so, right?
I'm sure that she does have a canonical name, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
I don't think so either, but she's played by the actress Vivian Pickles, is determined against Harold's wishes to find him a wife. One by one, Harold frightens and horrifies each of his appointed computer dates by appearing to commit gruesome acts of suicide, including self-immolation, self-mutilation, and seppuku, which I love the seppuku one. That's probably my favorite one because like the girl there actually does end up killing herself by accident.
The funniest thing about this to me, and probably the most satisfying thing, is it would be really easy to make all of these like young women that Harold's mom sets him up with just horrible, right? Just mean and vapid and just like rude or something and just like status obsessed. But I think this is a funny little wrinkle to the movie. They seem fine. They're nice girls. Some of them even seem kind of interested in like what he's saying and things. You know, they seem, you know, like a little, I don't know, a little strange. And it's still like, he's just like, no, not interested.
He's like, not interested. All right. I want that 79-year-old ass right now.
So I want to say, and I've actually always thought that they did find like the cutest looking 80-year-old woman. Like, so.
No, she is genuinely like very adorable. They didn't get so. Well, they also like give her that like there's a specific like word for it, but like that's like Slavic like hairstyle that's like a bun or not like a braid, but it's on like the top or whatever. Like
it's very flattering on her, and it's like you're like, okay, I guess if I was gonna like bang an 80-year-old, probably would be this one.
If I had to go and pick up an 80-year-old, this would be the one.
Anyways, did I mention this is my favorite movie, guys?
Yeah. All right. So after we have both confessed our love for our grandmothers, I'm just kidding, obviously, but
no, I'm in love with your grandmother and you're in love with mine.
Hell yeah, dude. It's like that
it's like that Lonely Island song.
Yeah, it's exactly
Were you going there? Yeah. We're so cool.
Hell yeah.
That is a very millennial reference. Oh my God.
It really is, but speaking of things that aren't millennial, so his mother attempts to enlist him in the military by sending Harold to his uncle, played by the actor Charles Tyner, who lost an arm serving under General MacArthur in World War II. But Harold deters the recruitment by staging a scene where Maude poses as a pacifist protester and Harold seemingly murders her, which is a great scene, by the way.
This is the best scene in the movie. This is the scene where I'm going to say it's not as concise as far as like explaining the themes as the earlier scene with Harold and his mom. But if you just wanted to see what I think makes this movie great, what makes it like sweet and romantic, and also what makes it like pretty revolutionary for the time it came out. So if I can just go through kind of the mechanics of this scene. So Harold's hawk uncle who has been mangled in the war and is basically pushing him. He's an American fascist. That's how it's presented
Yes,
to us.
very, very much a stereotype of like the complete, jingoistic, just blood-hungry guy that no matter what is just pledged to the flag no matter what. And he literally is missing an arm. He has like a fucking like, what is it, like a wire that like gets his like fucking cut off arm like sleeve to like do a salute. Like that's how like die in the wool he is.
So Harold, obviously, up to this point, just absolutely disinterested. Why the fuck would he? He has nothing in common with this guy. And in this moment, Harold pretends to become like blood crazed and so excited by the notion of killing and torturing, and pulls out a shrunken head he's acquired to say like, "Oh, I could do this to someone," just terrifying his uncle, just terrifying him.
That's a really funny thing, though, too, because that is also something that's the final evolution of like a mass murderer neat, is that they just become like hyper violently militaristic in that way. And then they buy a bunch of guns and go shoot up a grocery store or something. But it is funny that like Harold goes through all of these like stages of what, like we mentioned, a mass shooter would go through, but just ends up being like, I just love this old lady. Like, it's hilarious.
The thing I think that I loved about this scene, obviously I love that it leads to them encountering Maude, who's pretending to be like an aged feminist socialist activist, and start arguing, quote unquote, arguing with Harold. But I especially love how everything Harold is saying that he'd love to do in the war are things that American soldiers have done. They've set women and children on fire, and they've done firing lines and all these things. But of course, Harold's uncle is mortified, just so disturbed, maybe not by the fact that Harold would join the war and do them, because he's almost certainly done or approved the doing of those things, but just that he's talking about it out loud, sort of.
It is very much don't say the quiet part out loud. That was what Vietnam basically was. Like that was why the Tet Offensive was seen as like, holy shit, this is actually like really, really bad, because Americans were just like, oh yeah, we're just protecting their freedom. They love us over there. And then they see it on TV and they're like, oh God, this is actually really, really, really bad.
This is America is a moral force in the war. And what we do in war is objectively moral and necessary all the time, until you see it on the nightly news while you're eating dinner.
And it's like, maybe not so great. But yeah, so
I think it's good.
So anyways, Harold and Maude grow closer. Their friendship blossoms into a romance. Holding her hand, Harold discovers a number tattooed on her arm, indicating Maude survived the Nazi death camps. And, I saw a screenshot of a TikTok earlier where a German woman is like, why don't we have bagels in Germany? And it's like, maybe Maude might be able to answer that question for you. Just being honest here.
Well, I was wondering.
And I did see that, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding. And I looked it up. It is actually a real TikTok.
It's not, but that woman's not like trolling.
I don't think she's trolling, no.
Oh my God, that's fucking. I mean, the thing is, like, first of all, you probably do it. You can probably get bagels in Germany, lady. But also, like, you would think that you'd think about it for a second and not say it. Just be like,
oh yeah, why don't we have bagels in this country? We used to have lots of bagels. Oh, that's what happened. Yeah, but also, I actually
she was like, oh, I would love bagels even more if I could get toilet flavored.
Yeah. Germans are perverts. That is true. But, I actually did look up what a German bagel looked like once, because somebody was like in a country without a lot of individuals that might make bagels. I actually did look it up, and apparently German style quote unquote bagels are literally just bread. They're not actually bagels. Like they cut it open and it's like actually
what the fuck?
Bizarre.
That's the most anti-Semitic thing I've ever heard.
And that's coming from Germany. Like, oh, that's wild. But anyways, Harold announces after a lot of this that he will marry Maude, resulting in disgust outbursts from family, his psychoanalyst, and his priest. And honestly, that single scene, like that myriad of like reactions, might be my single most favorite scene, because like the psychoanalyst is like, well, there's a certain concept where you want to have sex with your mother, but in this case, you want to have sex with your grandmother.
And this is the psychoanalyst is such a great scene, because this is like a classic Freudian head shrinker. And like I like to read psychology. I have mixed feelings about Freud, as I think most people in this day and age do. It's funny, the idea that this blue blood that just takes Freud 100% at face value, and when Harold expresses, like, for the first time in his life, a genuine enthusiasm and a feeling of warmth and love, his shrink goes, well, this is because you're a pervert. Like,
yeah. And also the priest one's really funny. He's like, your supple young flesh going up against saggy flesh. And he's also like, and I don't know who that actor was, but that actor like portrays that level of disgust and genuinely, like he's crying through anger. It's awesome.
And do you read that scene the same way, knowing, what we know now more widely know about the Catholic Church? Do you read that scene the way I do, where it's that he's well being disgusted by it? He's kind of also like fixating on the physicality of it, and like you and your firm, smooth body against her wrinkled, sick. Like he's like imagining it very graphically as he voices disgust.
Just like with Catholics everywhere, Brian, as somebody who grew up Catholic like myself, a lot of sexual pathology going on there. A lot.
No.
A
With the
lot.
Catholics, no.
Yeah, never.
No.
Catholics are always very normal about sex. Very, very, especially sex involving maybe motherly or grandmotherly individuals. Very normal about it.
Also, and I'm sure that we talked about this on the Exorcist 3 episode back in the day, but like, you ever look at like Catholic like images of Christ, and he's like his body's like glistening and like tone, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here?
The original artist was like just 1% away from having like a dick print.
Yeah. And it's like, what,
those
those
cum gutters like really defined.
Yeah, he's like up on the cross and like, oh.
Oh yeah, stab me more, prefect.
Oh, it hurts. Oh.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Unbeknownst to Harold, Maude has been planning to commit suicide on her 80th birthday. Maude's birthday arrives and Harold throws a surprise party for her. As the pair dance, Maude tells Harold that she couldn't imagine a lovelier farewell. And then he bangs her, which is great. You know what's really funny is I'll save it for the Amazon reviews, but the Amazon reviews really love to focus on the fact that we don't actually get to see them fuck. There's a couple of them that I found, and I'm like, did we have to see that? Is that something you really wanted?
I mean, like, how much do we need to see? I guess, like,
the implication is they definitely
they fuck. Yeah, they fuck. They get married. They're in love. They fuck. Why wouldn't they fuck? But what do you need to see? Like, this is a PG movie again. Like, this is new Hollywood, but it's still Hollywood.
I also love in the scene when they're like waking up, he's got like a 5 o'clock shadow.
Well, yeah, because he's a man now.
It's so good. Oh, geez. When Maude reveals that she has taken an overdose of sleeping pills and will be dead by midnight, Harold rushes Maude to the hospital. Devastated after learning of Maude's death, Harold speeds down a country road and sends his car off a seaside cliff. Following the crash, Harold stands calmly atop the cliff holding his banjo. After gazing down at the wreckage, he plucks the banjo strings and dances away to "If You Want to Sing Out, Sing Out." And once again, that scene inspired a million Wes Anderson movies and clones. That ending, like, it's
in the worst fucking way.
In the worst fucking way possible. And also, by the way, one last thing before we get to the Amazon reviews here. I really love I should say love, like, obviously, like, it's like hilarious or something. But like the scene where he's in the hospital and like there's no dialogue or something, but everything is like told through the environmental storytelling. Do you think that was the inspiration for the comic Loss?
Yeah, Taylor, I think so. Yes, I think the Penny Arcade comic Lost was inspired by the climax. Fuck, get the fuck out of here. This episode is over.
No, Brian, actually, that's not even Penny Arcade. That was the Penny Arcade knockoff. I think it was Control-Alt-Delete.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
How could I not have known?
But Brian, didn't you watch that fucking H-Bomber guy? He did a whole fucking like 4-hour long video on Loss or something. All right.
I mean, I would watch that if it's funny. Like, I watch fucking autistic 5-hour videos all the time. But I mean, Taylor, I don't know. I gotta say that I don't think that the gamer webcomic guys, I mean, if they saw this movie, and they might have, it's a cult classic, I don't want to think about it.
No, I don't want to think about it either. They would have been like, this movie is an epic fail, and they would have did a double thumbs down.
Well, the worst part, actually, Taylor, I've thought of my actual answer to this. It would be better if Loss was inspired by that scene in this movie and not by real life events.
Yeah,
it would be less upsetting.
It would be, yeah, it would. Oh, God. But you know what? Speaking of upsetting and lame assholes, let's get into our Amazon reviews. Because, Brian, I actually have 6 Amazon reviews this time. There were a myriad of individuals with a lot of different opinions. This was actually probably the most ideologically, like, diverse Amazon review section I've ever seen.
Well, I am legitimately excited. I'm also kind of tensing up. As you know, Taylor, the Amazon reviews are my favorite segment. They always make me feel really good about people. This is a very important movie to me. I know it's corny. It's almost kind of like to be like a millennial, like kind of a nerdy guy. Like, I love her. I get it. I know. But it is. I am sure there are just some absolute nightmares in these reviews.
There are, and I found some pretty solid 5-star reviews here first. So let's get it started on a good note, I will say.
Okay.
So our first review here is from Holly, who gives us 5 stars. And the header of her review says, irreverent, funny, sad, heartfelt, joyous, and uplifting. A black comedy that's got it all. And she's screaming the whole time, very clearly.
I love black comedies.
I love Undercover
Barbershop.
Yeah, this is definitely not that kind of black comedy for sure. I don't think no, there is. No, okay, never mind. I'm not going to get into the single black character in this movie because maybe a very pre-civil rights black character, although he doesn't have any dialogue at least. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, to people who haven't seen the film, it's by design in the movie that this, like, the filmmakers, I mean, it is a very white movie. I'm not saying that's necessarily by design because this is about, like, wasps ultimately, right?
Yes. This is a very upper middle class kind of story to tell, a very white upper middle class one. Not discounting, obviously, its timeless value to many, many people, but that is just objectively what the movie is. But anyway, so the body of the review said, Harold is 19, Maude is 79. He hates life. She loves it and embraces it fully.
I already have a slight disagreement, and I'm just very. I love this. Let me be a little fucking stupid about this.
Oh.
I don't really think I almost called him Bud. I don't think Harold like hates life that way, or that Maude like loves life in that way. I think that they like he's alienated by all this bullshit, but it's not like that's the thing that kind of differentiates him from like a later on version of this character, right? Is he's not like nasty. He doesn't have this nasty, cynical view of people. He's just bored, right?
He's bored and very clearly depressed. Bored and very clearly depressed. He's
like clinically depressed and undiagnosed, and his family's thinking wrong. But I would also say Maude is not like, again, she's not like this whimsical, quirky for quirky sake. I know I'm being a little petty here, but I really want to drive it home. There is like a sadness to this character, and she feels the same alienation he feels.
No, yeah, exactly. Like she was a former political prisoner / like Holocaust survivor. Like,
yeah.
She's enjoying life to the most that she possibly can after probably all of her family and friends were murdered in the war. Like,
I know that to people listening, this might sound like I'm being petty, but like I do feel like I really want to drive home that this movie isn't all quirked up the way that it might sound.
No, absolutely fucking not. So, going on the review here, not a lot in common. Well, they both like funerals. Gotta start somewhere.
I said, what about going to funerals? You said I prefer when the people I don't know.
This movie is a classic, and Ruth Gordon is an icon. Done in 1972. This movie is very
You're
much
like hurting my ears.
Yeah. And yet it is completely timeless. I saw it about 35 years ago and loved it. It has not lost anything. Maybe I like it even more than before. It is described as a black comedy. It's funny, but it is also so much more. It is a lesson, one we would all be so much better off learning. The Cat Stevens soundtracked. They didn't say soundtrack. They said soundtracked. Is great and fully fits like a glove where this film goes. Interesting for me is the locale. Seeing recognizable sites in San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo County that are 40 years old. Also, Tom Skerritt has a part where he was billed as Mr. Borman. I like cinema history and trivia. It eventually becomes a May-December romance. Sounds icky, but it's not. Again, this is a movie, a national treasure. I so highly recommend it. So that is Miss Holly here. And even though, I wouldn't entirely agree with this review, for Amazon, I would say this is a pretty agreeable review, I will say.
Yeah. I mean, like, I always enjoy getting reviews by people who saw these films when they came out or about when they came, older viewers. Yeah, I mean, aside from me splitting hairs for a second there, I can't really argue with this review. As a person who loves this movie, thinks it's funny, thinks it's affecting and genuine, I can't find too much to argue with about that.
Hell yeah. And the next person here is L.A., who gives us 5 stars. And the head of the review says, love it. And the body of the review says, of course, Brian, we talked about, obviously, agreeable reviews. This is probably the most agreeable Amazon review I've ever seen. So the body of the review says, so grateful to have this incredible message of a movie, and go Amazon workers. Union for protection as Jeff's made billions off of us all in the pandemic, especially you. And that's the end of the review. So I'm all about union solidarity. So good for you, LA.
Yeah, thumbs up. Maude wrote that review.
Yeah. She sent it. Like she had like a proto computer, like fucking sending a proto Amazon review in 1971 on her deathbed.
Well, Harold's mom was setting him up with dates on computer dating. She was making computer Amazon posts 50 years into the future.
Exactly. And of course, we've agreed pretty much with those two reviews. So let's get into the reviews where I don't agree with anything. So Jesse K gives us 2 stars, and the head of the review says, another manic pixie dream girl flick. And of course, we've already discussed a lot on this episode about how we do not agree with that segment, and this person gets it totally fucking wrong. I'm just going to be very clear here, Brian, so better pucker up your asshole here, because this one's pretty rough. So the body review says, nothing against the filmmakers. They were simply making a film of its time. But as a woman watching Harold and Maude in 2020, it is yet another film in a long litany of films in which the female character serves merely as a one-dimensional prop.
Shut up!
Male character's broken spirit, only to be killed off at the end so that the male can walk off into the sunset playing a fiddle and sing a happy tune.
Loser!
It's so nauseating. I agree with that. That's the one part I agree with, but I'm calling you nauseating, Jesse.
Loser. Please send me a screen cap of this review.
I will.
How old is this person? How old do we think this person is? 14?
I'm going to guess either 14 or 43. That's going to, like a 40, like a Gen X feminist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Harold and his broken spirit, his misanthropy, his nihilism, his hatred of his mother is what should have died at the end, not Maude. But the patriarchy of Hollywood, which endures to this day, can't have that. Ugh, long live Maude. Long live
femininity. Suck my dick, bitch.
Yeah, this is, I usually try not to judge too much on self-righteous feminists, but this is the most annoying self-righteous feminist I've seen in a while. This is really annoying. This is really fucking annoying. This is BuzzFeed feminist level analysis. This shit.
And I know this isn't, I'm not the best person to say for a multitude of obvious reasons. This type of feminism, to me, it feels like misogynist. It puts women in a weird position in relation to men and to their own expression where it defines everything within that. And I think that it's weird. I don't think that it bridges the gap or dismantles gender roles. I think it sucks.
So either. Yeah, this person definitely is getting the boo-boo tomato of fucking Amazon.
I don't know. Did you just come up with that?
Oh no, that was a meme I saw on Twitter.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But speaking of another person who gets boo-boo tomatoes here, so the next review here is from 50251, Sid, who gives us 2 stars. And I think they may have put their fucking area code in there, or their zip code or whatever, and then added their name.
They dox themselves in the Harold and Maude review.
Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna find out where the fuck this area code is real quick. So anybody who lives in central Iowa, I'm gonna guess that's where they live, somewhere in central Iowa. It gives us 2 stars. And the head of the review says, meh. And the body of the review says, this movie was considered outre, not outre, like
outra.
Outra, okay, right? Fair enough. Yeah, something like that. In 1971. And in 2014, I find it just distasteful. Ruth Gordon is supposed to be this delightful free spirit, but she's merely obnoxious. And
I need you to send me this one too.
Yeah, I will send both of these, I promise. In the scene where Bud Cort's character, Harold, who is perhaps 19 or 20 years old, wakes up next to his 80-year-old girlfriend. I'm not making this up. After a night of carnal knowledge
Why would you be making it up?
I wish I could unsee what I saw. I am a woman of a quote-unquote certain age. Although nowhere near 80 in parentheses. This makes me think this woman's 89 years old. And this is so hilarious because she just bemoans how awful this is, but she plays right into it right here. And God knows I'd love to have a 19 or 20-year-old plaything. But let's be real here. If I want to see this kind of ridiculous fantasy stuff, I'll watch Les Grandes Charlots, which at least has Francois Arnon's naked in the shower. So I love how it's this is perverted, but I'm a pervert, but my perversion's okay.
Exactly. This is bullshit, because I don't think Harold and Maude is perverted. It's a very sweet movie. That's why you don't see them fucking, because that's not, it could be about that, and it would be fine to me, to be clear. But that's not what it's about. It's about expressing a certain type of alienation and finding humanity through it. But so she's like, oh, this is actually really degenerate. It's really depraved, and it's actually pretty exploitative. And to be clear, I like that. Yeah. That's what this reviewer is saying.
I mean, honestly, if it was me, if they had shown, Bud Cort just giving Ruth Gordon just back shots and you just hear the slap, I mean, that would be interesting at least. I don't know if I'd want to see that.
I don't think I'd be I'd probably be like, oh, I'm kind of surprised they did that. But I mean, it's weird to do the 1-2 punch of this is depraved and disgusting and whatever. And also it's a fantasy and I would watch something else with it. But this, what?
Yeah,
and this, I think, gets to the nut of, to bring us full circle, these really fucking performative and loud moralizers about certain things is like, well, like, I don't think when I watch Harold and Maude, I'm not really thinking about them having sex. I don't think most people are. That's not at the forefront of most people's mind. But the person who is going to make some weird, logical fallacy, like, judgment about it, they're thinking a lot about it.
No, it's yeah, a lot of the age gaps. I was like, oh my God, that's so gross. Could you imagine them fucking? That's so gross. like, imagine them just like fucking coming. It's so
Yeah, and
gross.
it's like, yeah, that they're being like the priest in the movie.
Yeah. Well, speaking of somebody who maybe thinks like a priest, so our next review here is a 1-star review from LA and PA. So I guess this guy did the fucking opposite of who is the vocalist? Oh, Lee Ving.
Oh yeah.
He did the opposite of Lee Ving. Gives us 1 star. And the head of the review says, more vile leftist propaganda and gore.
Okay, send me this one as well. I need you to send me all of the negative Harold and Maude reviews you found for this episode, please.
Yeah. In a nice story. Yeah, right. And the body of the review says, this movie has scenes of suicide, blood, and gore. No matter what the so-called plot of a young man trying to escape a 1% family, it is just trash, more of the same from today's Hollywood. Polluted with leftist political innuendos, not worth the time.
This person sucks. What movie do you think this person likes? Like, what is this fucking, do you think this person watched this movie? Did they read a synopsis and they're probably like a 28-year-old like Paul poster. And they were like, this movie is depraved. It's for degenerates. It's leftist communist propaganda. I haven't actually seen it.
This person, I'm going to guess, is probably, either 28 or like 53. And they watch whatever Daily Wire slop out there and they've jacked off to Brett Cooper and the Shapiro siblings because they all look exactly the same. I guarantee.
Well, because there's a type of boomer that has come around to being right wing, but maybe wasn't always. We've talked about this type of the kind of misguided, like aging boomer who's found their way to reactionary politics, kind of regrettably.
The former Obama voter turned Trump voter.
But that person would like this movie because they'd be like, yeah, this is back in the day when we were like shaking things up. You'd either have to be like a young adult, like fucking 4chan post who has like strong opinions about everything being degenerate and has like statues in your Twitter profile picture, or you'd have to be like 90 years old when this movie comes out.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. You have to be like, oh, those kids with their bell bottoms. And it's like, Grandpa, it's 2024. Like, nobody's worn bell bottoms. It's in 50 years. Oh, but I thought it was gross when it came out.
Like, I'm still thinking about it.
Oh, God. And our last review here is from somebody that, honestly, Brian, even though this is a negative review, this might actually be someone you might be interested in hearing from. I'm being dead serious here. So, Daniela gives us 1 star. And the head of the review says, as someone who can relate to the plot. And the body of the review says, my partner and I have a massive age difference. In parentheses, 40 years.
Okay, I need 60. This one too.
I'm giving you all the negative reviews.
Yeah, for real.
So I thought I'd watch this to see Hollywood's take on a relationship like this. The plot was cute, I guess, but it was very short and the ending was terrible. It was nice that it showed that two people are capable of loving each other despite age, but it seemed to imply that it was only for the insane. This movie was an insult, depressing, and a waste of time. Thank God it was free.
So this person was expecting this to be a movie about an age gap couple who have like a perfect life. That's what they wanted.
Which, it's one of those things where, once again, I would never judge anybody for having an age. As long as everybody's an adult, I don't really care, obviously.
I don't care.
But the thing is that a lot of age gap relationships, especially, 40 years is fucking significant. But like 40 years is one of those things where, let's be honest here, a lot of those circumstances, they probably would not come from maybe the most rosy or Hollywood of circumstances here. Let's be honest here, right?
Which, again, I don't care. But, like, this person seems like I'm going to do a little armchair psychoanalyzing on this review, right? Because I'm not mad at this review the way I'm mad at the other ones. But, like, they were looking for movies about age gap couples that were perfect because, like, they're feeling weird about it maybe, or people have made them feel weird.
They wanted a movie to validate them.
Yeah, which, like, I would say this movie does, but it still has to be it has to have conflict. It has to have, like, problems and some unpleasantness, to be an interesting movie.
No, I 100% agree. And, I'm really glad that I was, and obviously some of these reviews are just objectively, outside of this very one, which is already kind of questionable, but some of these, like, fucking negative reviews were some of the shittiest I've seen in a while, just being honest with you here. Like,
this one, I think this person, maybe I'm armchair psychoanalyzing. Maybe they've been made to feel weird about their relationship and they just wanted to see a nice movie that they felt reflected their thing. And, this isn't what they were expecting. And I can at least understand why this person might have been like, well, that doesn't reflect my experience, that a lot of people already don't understand. Those other 3 reviews.
Absolute dumbasses. Like, honestly, I think
bad people.
The guy with the vile leftist Prague was a propaganda. And by the way, it's propagnanda. So I didn't say it wrong. That's how he put it. But honestly, maybe he's fucking Harold's uncle. That might be him.
I mean, that's what, he saw that character and he was like, finally, here's our hero.
Yeah.
And he kept waiting for the movie to come back to him.
This Hal Ashby, noted reactionary filmmaker Hal Ashby. Oh, God. But, actually, one last thing before we get...
his jib.
One thing before we get to our final thoughts of pluggables. By the way, I need to ask, because I asked this on the fucking... God, who are the guys who did the Kings of Punk? Oh, Poison Idea. So Hal Ashby grew up in Portland. Did you also choose this because he grew up in Portland, Brian?
I don't even think about it, to be honest. It's the last thing I think of when I make selections for the movie.
Honestly, I don't always think about locations of like things that I relate to, but I sometimes do, especially, with Pig, for example. That was like a perfect episode for that.
No, don't get me wrong. I like it when you do it. I like it. I think it's a good angle, but it is absolutely does not enter into my personal calculus.
Do you think? Okay, never mind. We'll get into it once we get into the Ashby fucking cinematic universe, the fucking ACU.
I love Hal Ashby. I mean, we've talked about Warren Beatty. We've talked about Ashby. I love this era of film. I am absolutely that type of like basic ass film nerd who, like, when I was in middle school, early high school, I became obsessed with like this era. And I didn't know it was called New Hollywood or anything, but like, we're going to do more Hal Ashby. Friend of the pod, Hal Ashby.
Yeah, you mentioned Warren Beatty. I mean, fucking Shampoo is right around the corner for his filmography here. And that's, of course, the Hal Ashby and Warren Beatty movie.
About as essential as Harold and Maude, maybe a little less essential. I don't. We'll get into it someday.
Well, apparently Criterion didn't think so, because that was the most bare bones fucking Criterion release I've ever bought. Like for full price. No, I'm serious. It doesn't even have subtitles. It's just the movie, and it has two special features. Recent? One of them is horribly cropped. So like it's just literally Warren Beatty's face. It's not even well cropped. And the other is like just film critics talking about it, which isn't like awful, but that should be part of it. That shouldn't be one of 2 special features. It doesn't have a commentary or anything either. It's so bare bones.
Do you remember in the 2000s, during the golden age of DVDs, everything had like 3-disc editions with the best features in the world. And now fucking Criterion releases for like prestige movies, cult classics aren't getting shit.
Yeah, for movies that were giant box office success when it came out. Because, like, spoilers if we ever get into Shampoo, which of course we are going to at some point. But Shampoo, in comparison to this movie, Shampoo was like a gigantic box office success when it came out.
Yeah.
It made $60 million on a $4 million budget, which is like the exact opposite of this fucking movie. All right, but any final thoughts before we get into our pluggables, Brian?
Harold and Maude is one of the greatest films of all time. I think everyone should see it. I have nothing bad to say about it. It's a film of its time, but I think one of the things we always say on Millennials are old is like everything is of its time, and doesn't make something bad. It's just the way things are. This is very much of its time. But that was a crazy time. It's a crazy movie. And it's a movie that, I'm sorry, couldn't exist the way it does now, both because for valid reasons and also for some pretty fucking stupid ones. I think it probably is the greatest romantic comedy of all time, with The Wedding Singer being close behind it. Basically, I think anyone that likes film should see this movie.
I would agree, yes. This is a movie that I remember, I totally forgot to mention earlier, but I first saw this movie, I want to say about 10 years ago. And I remember I liked it, but having rewatched it now twice for this episode, I had just forgotten just how, time, I mean, even though of course you said of its time, but it is also timeless in that way as well. Like, if you're a fan of romantic comedies, if you're a fan of New Hollywood, if you like maybe the concept of, like a Zach Braff, Manic Pixie Dream Girl, or Wes Anderson sort of twee bullshit movie, but you want to see it in a way that's, just being honest, good, I think this is an example. If you liked that
stuff, but maybe you outgrew it.
Yeah, or maybe you want to see maybe a less extreme version of it, or just like a proto version of it, but obviously, once again, a better version of it. It's a fantastic movie to watch. And also, Brian, I think another connection that this movie has with something you like is that this is one of Henry Rollins' favorite movies.
Yeah, do you know the Bud Cort story, the story about Bud Cort and Henry?
Oh, I have no idea. Is it really bad?
No. It's just Bud Cort made this movie. He directed and wrote and starred in this film where he plays a stalker who's obsessed with a woman. And throughout the film, the stalker is sending this woman letters, and their letters are getting progressively more fucked up. And Bud Cort had read some of Henry Rollins' books and decided he wanted Henry Rollins to write the insane love letters.
What movie is it?
What the fuck is it called? Someone in Venus? I've never actually seen it.
Honestly, that sounds fucking awesome. That sounds really cool.
I looked it up while you were loading up the meeting. Ted and Venus is what it's called.
Venus. Okay, I'm legit gonna check that. That sounds fucking wild to me. Holy fucking shit.
Yeah, written, directed, and starring Bud.
Hell yeah, he's a real Air. No, that I can't do that. I was gonna make a thing about Air Bud, but
Air Bud Court.
Yeah. There's no rule saying that a stalker can't have Henry Rollins write his letters.
There's no rule saying an 18-year-old can't date an 80-year-old. We gotta let him do it.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, there really isn't though. That is objectively a legal thing to do.
Yeah. Guess what? I hope some fucking age gap weirdos find this episode and fucking go to war with us.
Hell yeah, dude. We need more engagement. We need more engagement.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. So, yes, that is our review of Harold and Maude. So, let's get into our pluggables here. So, you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, you can follow us at both our YouTube and our Spotify. Please subscribe and follow both of those platforms because we are uploading every episode to both of them simultaneously. So, you will get this episode sometime in the next 3 years, I think is when I'm going to upload. I have no idea. But it will come out one of these days. I'm pushing these episodes pretty far out so I can catch up with them, but
yeah,
you will hear our thoughts on Harold and Maude, and by then, at that point, Barry Keoghan will be 73 years old, and Sabrina Carpenter will somehow revert back to an 18-year-old or something. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. Anything could happen by then. I have no idea.
If you've ever wondered why we don't really, I mean, we kind of have done like holiday and seasonal specials, but we always make them kind of loose. It's because we bank episodes like fuck.
Yeah, we do. And then, well, speaking of bank, also, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father GoFundMe. Of course, our good friends Scott, Sean, Robert are creating a fantastic series. They have their first episode out, but they need a little bit more money, of course, to fund future episodes in their series. So please donate to the Indiegogo campaign. Every dollar counts. And Brian, I'm going to say it for once before you do, but I know you're going to agree with me. For every single donation that you donate to Lucifer and the Father, that you can verify that you got that information from us, we will match your donation up to a reasonable amount. So anywhere between like 20, 25, maybe even $30, at least on my end. So please donate to this fantastic campaign for Lucifer and the Father.
And when we say that you need to verify that you were brought to their crowdfunding effort by our show, what I mean is that you need to send to me back a picture of my own penis, which I send to every listener who subscribes on all platforms.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, before we get the puriteens coming after us, we just made comment in our YouTube video. That's all. Or Instagram or anything. Just say, hey, heard about Lucifer and the Father through you guys. I'm holding you to it. And it's like, okay, that's fine. That works.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna be like, well, what are your top 5 favorite Millennials are old bits? How did we rank all of the Billy Jack movies if you're such a big fan?
Yeah. What's the 6th Billy Jack movie? Like a question you can't even answer.
Yeah. Between Brian and Taylor, which one is the hot couch guy?
The answer may shock you. Oh, Jesus. But yes, once again, please donate to the campaign. We love those guys. Those guys are cool.
Yeah, they're great friends to the pod. And Lucifer and the Father, what's cool about it, I know we haven't really said it in a while, is that it's like a play. Like, it's like an ambitious play, but it's all very much about, like, acting and, like, interactions between characters. That's what I liked about the episodes we've gotten so far.
Absolutely, 100%. We are being unironic in our approval. Legit. It's cool as shit.
Yeah. And yeah, follow us at Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram and at the Millennials Are Old Facebook page. Age gaps are fake. They're a social construct. I just want people to get mad at me about that. Clip things I say here, and I'm trying to get canceled so that I can pivot to that right-wing grifter money.
Yes, Brian. I think there's a lot of different ways you could do about it. Say about trying to think. Oh, I know. Say the Bud Light controversy was a very complicated situation, but don't elaborate until you get that money.
Here's the thing. There's lots of sides to the Bud Light thing, and lots of people have lots of feelings about it, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. Every side has valid opinions, but one side has especially valid opinions, but the other side has also especially valid opinions as well.
Let's just say that everyone has opinions.
Exactly.
And they're like assholes, or I don't know how that goes.
You know, Brian, I actually think everybody in this situation is fucking stupid. All right. We got to meet in the middle.
You know what? How about no lives matter? Ever think about that? Oh, and you're like, oh, fuck, you didn't expect him to say that, did you? The crazy millennial.
Yeah, Brian. That's the
My
thing,
name
right?
is Mr. Monkey Cheese. Oh, man. And you're like, what? What is he talking about? That's crazy. But that's just how my brain works.
You know, Brian, we shouldn't think about politics. We should think about people. All right. And that's who's most important is people, not politics.
Yeah, I don't really think about politics mostly. I just think about like, man, if you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you, right? And that's what's important, right?
But if you fuck with my sister or you fuck with my friends,
dude, if you fucking, you know what? I'm the coolest, most chill guy. But if you make me cry, you better watch out because when I cry, I get like so strong, man, and I don't even care what I do.
You know, I'm the coolest guy ever, but if you say Violent J and call him Violent Gay, oh man, you better fucking run, dude. You better fucking.
You call him Feminem? Oh my God, man. I wish he were here because what I'm going to do to you isn't as bad as what he would do, man. You're lucky it's me and not him.
You know, man, if you call LeBron Le Gay or Le Bitch, I'm going to break your fucking neck hole. All right, dude.
Oh man, they were giving me flashbacks.
Just flashbacks to the dumbest losers we knew back home.
Yeah, and also like guys I hung out with and was friends with.
Did I ever tell you like this loser ass guy that I went to high school with later ended up in like a fucking ICP documentary about like the Gathering?
No way.
No, seriously, like a dude that a couple of them actually. And they're in some, I don't know if it was like a big one, but it was at least like a video, I should say, by like, maybe not even a reputable news agency, but like, you know, citizen journalist type guy or whatever. And the two guys are no bullshit. They're painting their face, but they use a spray paint can.
Oh my God, that's so dark.
And they get it in their eyes and their teeth. And I went to high school with those guys. I very vividly remember them. And I remember they were the dumbest people I'd ever met in my fucking life, even back then.
And now they are Democratic congressmen.
Yes. Oh, you know, Brian, they were like DSA delegates for sure. Because we all know, obviously, ICP is very class conscious and they very much have the same political and social. Juggalos are basically just like upper middle class, like fucking downwardly mobile white dude bros.
Do you remember this shit? Do you remember people being like, actually, ICP is leftist?
Honestly, out of the whole like 2016 to 2018-ish, like,
no, they're fine.
DSA. Like, and by the way, I don't hate ICP, but people like unironically saying that shit, I'm like, you guys have never met a fucking juggalo in your life if you genuinely think that.
Look, okay, so here's the thing. You can, like, we read media in certain ways all the time. That's what we do on our show. That's part of what we do, right? But, like, if you're being sincere and you're like, actually, like, juggalos are feminist and leftist, it's like, well, they could be. Like, you can read them that way and that would be valid. But, like, you know what it reminds me of is, like, actually, juggalos are really cool and they're really smart and they're socialist. And also, actually, pro wrestling is pretty good. Both of these strands of people deluding themselves being like actually wrestling. And by the way, I think pro wrestling can be 5 friends that do wrestling. But like wrestling actually is really smart. Like, all right.
You know what honestly was, and I know this is totally off topic, obviously, from our episode here, but honestly, a lot of that was very much noble savaging of like poor, like trailer trash type people by like upper middle class, downwardly mobile, like DSA type people.
The juggalo thing, especially like the pro wrestling thing, though it's funny. I do think like, well, pro wrestling takes a skill and some of the characters are entertaining. The juggalo thing was a little noble savagey about like white trash. And by the way, I am not joking. I am white trash. Like but like it is not a cool place to come from. Okay. Like you always see like these middle class like actually rednecks, they're ACAB and they're socialist. And it's like, well, yeah, some of them, but like it's ahistorical to be like actually like hillbillies are categorically leftist and class conscious.
Yeah, as we know that fucking Marx and Engels very much believed that. They never wrote anything about that, like, contradicting, like, at all. They never wrote anything about... They're always like, oh yeah, fucking rural proletariat always woke. That was the thing that Marx and Engels famously said.
And they're on our side. They inherently are.
Yeah, if you
You know
look at the
what?
social demographics of literally any society, that would tell you that's not true. I'm
Well,
sorry.
there's this general trend among like people with our politics, like people in the section on the left we are, where they like to make everything theirs. Like they like to claim things, but it's so ahistorical that it's kind of like when people say punk is historically leftist, it's class conscious, and it's always feminist and it's queer. And it's like, hey, I know that would be cool, right? But that's just not true. You actually can't be punk if you aren't a leftist. Like that's just not true. Like
No.
it's just not historically true. But people on the left, they love to do that. They love to be like everything that's cool is leftist, and it's embarrassing.
Well, you know what? Speaking of a piece of art that is actually leftist, though, Harold and Maude. Once again, classic. Thank you very much, Brian, for
Well,
suggesting this episode. This was
I like it,
great.
so it must be leftist.
I mean, Hal Ashby though was he
Yeah,
like?
yeah. I mean, obviously, a big thing is that we divvy people up into generations, and it was like that's a part of what you and I do on this show. But like, there was a period of time where I'd say the space between leftist and liberal in this period, especially from like let's say the 60s to the 80s, was a lot squishier. And Hal Ashby would have been somewhere in that field, like a left lib. Probably wasn't so concrete, kind of like Warren Beatty at the time. Maybe now we'd call him a liberal, but at the time in America, you'd probably just call him a leftist, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And that's, I guess, where I'll leave off on this is if you like the types of movies that we like, if you like that era of New Hollywood and you want to see this film that captures a very specific cultural moment and it really affects it in kind of the way that movies like The Graduate or I don't fucking know, like Taxi Driver did. I think Harold and Maude is on that level.
Absolutely. But yeah, you know what? Speaking of old Hollywood, I'm feeling old and I need to go to sleep. So have a good night, everybody. Maud had a very good night's sleep after she took all the sleep. Never mind. I'm not going to go. That was very morbid, but
I'm actually waiting for a 109-year-old to come over to my place so that we can play the banjo together.
hell yeah, dude. All right. Have a good night. Enjoy your super septuagenarian gilf, Brian.
And if you want to think of me now, if you want to play down the boat, because there's a million.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.